to ask a question or give comment, please use the raise hand function. We ask that you turn on your camera so that your name appears when you speak. Please feel free to cover the camera on your device if you do not want to appear on the screen. Also, if you have not returned your conflict of interest form at this time, you are not permitted to participate in any motions or votes that need to occur today. With that being said, Julie, will you please begin taking the roll?
Gordon, can you go to the next slide? Keep going, Gordon. One more. Thank you so much. Is the representative from District 6 present?
Here.
Is the representative from the Hill CDC present?
Yes, present.
Is the representative from the Hill District Federal Credit Union present? Is the representative from the Hill District Consensus Group present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Wesley Center AME Zion Church present? Is a representative from Shenley Heights Community Development Program present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Historic Hill Institute present? Is the representative from the Ujamaa Collective present?
Yes, I'm here.
Is the representative from the Office of State Representative Jake Wheatley present? Is the representative of the Office of the County Executive Fitzgerald present? Is the Elaine, are you here? I see your name.
Yeah. Looks like she logged off. She may be having troubles.
Okay, give her a second. Is the representative of the Office of the Mayor present? Is the representative of Pittsburgh Public School District present? And is the representative from Allegheny Council present? It looks like Elaine's jumping back in. Jumping back on. Elaine, can you just state that you're present for us?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had sound issues, so I logged off and logged back on. Yes, Elaine
Thank you.
Ivasovic Lozada is present.
Thank you so much. Back to you, Councilman.
Thank you. So with that, we do have quorum as well as we have a majority of actual voting members. So with that being said, we can now move on to the approval of our minutes. As a reminder, because these meetings are being recorded and posted on the URA's website, URA staff will no longer be taking detailed minutes of our meetings. The recordings will serve as the minutes of the meetings of this advisory board, and the URA staff will compile, however, and share general notes from each meeting. The minutes from our first meeting, which occurred on 10/12/21, were distributed to you by email yesterday, February 2nd, 2022, with the submitted corrections added to the document as endnotes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the very first meeting?
I would like to put forth a motion that we wait because I didn't have enough time to review what was sent to me yesterday. So my motion that we give people enough time to read the minutes and vote on them the next meeting.
RB has put forth a motion. However, so far there is no second. Therefore, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, been properly motioned and second. Alicia made the motion, Marimba seconded. Are there any corrections to be made? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed, there are corrections, but I'm not given the opportunity. I oppose.
Thank you. Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Hearing one in opposition, one in abstention, the motion carries and the minutes are approved. Thank you. That'll move us on to our old business.
Excuse
Um,
me, in terms of some corrections that may be wanted later, I believe those can come up later under old business when we do them, whenever the person sees fit to make those.
Absolutely. I would ask.
And
if there
then
are
those
any-
would be included in that current meeting's minutes. It won't be lost. So, I just want to be clear that you still have an opportunity to make the corrections. Thank you.
Thank you, and duly noted.
Thank you
That
for
takes us
that.
to old business. The next Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund Advisory Board meeting will be held the week of February 21st, 2022. We are targeting Thursday, February 24th at 2 p.m. Is there a motion to direct staff, the URA staff, to schedule the next meeting of this board for the week of February 21st, targeting Thursday, February 24th at 2 p.m.?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second,
All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Thank you. Any in opposition? The motion passes and URA staff will have the next committee scheduled. Also, at our last meeting, we had a discussion about subcommittees. The advisory board passed a motion to form subcommittees, and there were 3 subcommittees that were created, and they are as follows. One was for the application for people to apply to the reinvestment fund. The second was a subcommittee, around creating an allocation plan. And then there was a third subcommittee that was discussed regarding a revolving loan. The chairs met and we've put together some basic general rules for the subcommittees. And I want to just go through those very briefly. Subcommittees are to schedule their own meetings. It will not be staffed by the URA. The meetings are to be held by the subcommittee participants, whomever so chooses to join them. Subcommittees will meet as often as needed to complete the tasks they are assigned by the deadline expected of the full board and/or the co-chairs. And subcommittees are to provide updates via reports to the co-chairs and the URA so that those reports can be included in the board presentations as we go through them, such as today. If you would like to join the application subcommittee, please state your name. You can also send us an email at a later time if you're uncomfortable stating your name today. Is there anyone who would like to join the application subcommittee and would like to say so now?
I would like
I
to
do.
join.
Lakeisha will.
Alicia George.
Thank you.
Harvey
Is there-
Bankston,
That is 3 so far. Is there anyone else? Thank you. We will make note of that and have that. We'll begin working, the co-chairs will begin working with you to get those meetings scheduled. Is there
may I
anyone
ask
who
a
would like?
question?
Yes, sir.
Oh, go ahead. I thought you were done. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll wait.
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to join the allocation plan subcommittee? Please also state your name.
Harvey Bankston,
Thank you, Arby. Is there anyone else who would like to join the application subcommittee?
is this allocation or application?
We did applications.
Application was first. This is the allocation.
Okay. Sound as though you said.
I may have
application.
misspoken, if so I apologize. We had 3 registered for the application subcommittee. I moved on to the allocation plan subcommittee. Is there anyone else in addition to RB who would like to participate in the allocation plan subcommittee? Seeing none at this time, we will also make sure when we email out minutes that people also have the opportunity to submit their names. You can also email us if you would like to join at a later time. That moves us to the third subcommittee that was created, which was the revolving loan subcommittee. Is there anyone who would like to volunteer to serve on the revolving loan subcommittee?
RB Bankston, but I have a question because it was my proposal.
Okay, let me just see if there's anyone else. Is there anyone else who would like to submit their name at this time? Okay, seeing none.
Can you say again which subcommittee this is?
This was for the revolving loan subcommittee. There was, and I believe this was suggested by Arby, so he may want to go into further detail, but at the last meeting, there was discussion of how to essentially be able to turn these dollars over so that you don't expend them one time and they're gone. And so there was conversation around, was there potential to create a revolving loan?
So
Arby, yes.
can I speak now, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first of all, it's not a revolving loan. A
Okay.
revolving loan is for business. It's similar to a home equity loan. The difference being unless the lender requires collateral for the revolving loan, the equity loan requires a house for collateral. This is not a loan. What I propose is that we use the money that we have to buy the buildings on the hill, vacant or condemned, to have good foundation. We would then hire an MWBE contractor to renovate the building. We would then sell the building. We would sell it at a discount for those that are 80% AMI or lower, and we would sell it at market rate for those that are not. The proceeds would be deposited into the Hill District Federal Credit Union. The original amount that was paid to renovate the building would be remitted back to the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund, and it would repeat. My point was that the fund is not versed in making loans. The Hill District Federal Credit Union is, and that he would probably be better suited. And I think he agreed because it's sustainable, it capitalizes the Hill District Federal Credit Union, and it also puts people to work, NWBE companies, firms, however you choose to characterize it, put them to work on the Hill. And perhaps there would be residents or other people throughout the city that would want to work on the, and the intent is to make money, not spend all the money, and be able to do a lot of things that we need to do on the Hill that have been lacking over the last decade or 2 decades. So to clarify, it's not a revolving loan. We are not in the loan business. We would purchase the building, hire a contractor, and the contractor will be responsible to renovate the property. You know, there's steps involved there that the committee would sort out and we would lay it out. So that's what I proposed. And if there's any questions, I will answer them.
I
Okay.
do have a question, RB. This is Lakeisha. When you say we will purchase them, what entity are you talking about? This advisory board, or what entity are you referring to?
Yes, the advisory board would purchase the property from the city URA, or if it's a private entity, and then hire a contractor to renovate the property. The intent is to get people back on the Hill. We need small business, but we're losing residents at such an alarming rate that it'll be very difficult for small business to be sustainable. I support small business, but we need to do things in a prioritized manner. And getting residents on the hill is one of the first steps. There may be others. We don't have anything that on the hill that people would want to come live on the hill or do business on the hill. Those things have to be explored. There's a perception issue. There's many things that need to be done. The whole thing that I'm looking at is the Hill District has always been known as a predominantly Black neighborhood community. I want to maintain that. I feel that if we don't do this, that eventually we will no longer be a predominantly Black neighborhood, which can place people in jeopardy if you understand current events and recent current events. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
My understanding of the subcommittee as it was proposed at the other meeting was that this would be a committee that would research, be a part of developing guidelines for loans to regenerate funds. Simply put, Arby, what you've described is kind of twofold to me, and it kind of puts this advisory board basically in a position of being a project applicant when we start talking about we're going to purchase with funds, things like that. And that's why, to my knowledge, this committee was solely going to be for the purpose of researching and developing ways to regenerate this funding and keep it with us, not necessarily using the funding to fund our own projects, because that's kind of what that may end up looking like in the long run. So I want to say I'm in support of part two, definitely, of what you're saying, but that's what we're also asking applicants to do. So our subcommittee should be focused on developing a way, and everything you said about keeping it, and Richard agreed and added to it, I'm definitely on board with. And that's what I thought the subcommittee was designed to do, not necessarily become a project applicant. And not just looking at it from the standpoint of this advisory board, but all who may apply, because someone else mentioned, I believe it was Dr. Ellis, about how we would go about granting these loans and determining loans versus grants. So that was, to me, the basis and premise for this subcommittee.
Okay.
And I just wanted to be clear on that because it's kind of evolving, and I don't recall that being, and even looking at my notes, that being the issue for the subcommittee.
Well, when I put forth the motion, that was my intention, and to describe other methods was also included.
Right. And I mean, I
But when
understand your intention, but I'm also looking at the purpose of a subcommittee. Everyone will have an intention, but the subcommittee to me was supposed to be a group that sets guidelines and determines what's loanable, what's grantable, and how we differentiate between the two.
Well, I thought that was included with the application, but you know, those things we can sort out. So here's another question I have.
So that
So
would be the purpose for this subcommittee, not to commit to this group buying property and basically doing projects with the monies.
Well,
That's all I wanted to be clear on.
Okay, so the way I envision this, that we would explore.
Well, I
Or
think
the
your
various
vision
things.
and intent would be a discussion for the subcommittee. Right
Right.
now, I think we're just trying to determine and develop a subcommittee and define its purpose and parameters.
Well, she called it a revolving loan, and that's not what I intended. So I'm now confused. I know we talked about many other
Agreed.
ways to, and all those things would be included. And if that's what you want to do with this committee, I'm fine with that. Nothing's excluded.
Right, I agree with you on the revolving loan part because I don't have that in my notes necessarily. I have revolving funding. So,
Right.
you know, I agree with that. But I'm just saying for the purposes of this and achieving the goal here of Daniel just presenting this as a group, I want to make sure that this subcommittee really is defined. Because
Well-
also remember, we asked for an accountant or financial advisor as well. So, I mean, these are things that we discussed at the last meeting. So I want to make sure that those items are not lost and convoluted.
They are,
Agreed.
excuse me, they are not lost. The fund advisor is the next point of discussion for
Cool.
today on today's agenda.
Mhm.
From my perspective, based upon what I've heard,
Mhm.
we can come up with a more appropriate name for the revolving loan subcommittee, but it's essentially a subcommittee to discuss how much is loanable versus grantable dollars, if I'm hearing everyone correctly. I believe what Arby is suggesting, which was regarding the purchasing of property and the development of it, I think speaks to one, an item under that we're going to touch under new business, as well as I think it's a conversation that would absolutely fall into the allocation subcommittee, because you would need to be determining what percentage of dollars you wanted to potentially utilize for that purpose. And so I think what Arby's initial intent, which I always say I got wrong, can be handled under the allocation subcommittee.
Well, it's both, Daniel, because the whole point is to make this money sustainable so that we don't do, say, for example, what happened, and a lot of people are very opinionated about the money that went into the growth fund and not see any tangible evidence of improvement on the Hill. So that's the feedback that I've been getting from the people I've talked to. So the whole point that I was making is that we touched on three things: sustain the money in the fund, capitalize the Hill District Federal Credit Union, and housing. Housing, small business that's sustainable. My core intent is that this money is sustainable and it's not spent and we don't have anything to show for it. And then you have to take into consideration the things that are coming. We already know that Census Tract 506 up Shenley Heights no longer qualifies for CDBG money. Next will be Census Tract 305. And what that's going to mean to the people that reside in those census tracts and things of that nature. There's a lot of things that we touched on in the first meeting, such as one of the examples was if somebody needed a roof and it was an emergency, or a furnace, a senior, things like that. Those things we need to discuss. And I'm trying to understand. I'll stop there because I didn't know, because Dr. Ellis had mentioned the procedure that we have as needing to be worked on. So she's not here, but I support that. But there are things that we need to address systematically so that we have a good process that's very easy to understand and to implement. Thank you.
Thank you. And I understand the intent of ensuring that the dollars are turned over and not simply gone, but are be able to be utilized for an extended period of time. I completely understand. I think most people share that sentiment. I also do want to note for the record, Dr. Ellis is with us. So for those who have registered for subcommittees, we will get that information out. Working with my co-chair, Ms. Malyans, will begin reaching out to you to begin convening those meetings and where we can talk through all of this in detail and then report back to the larger committee, the larger board, excuse me. So next, still under old business, is the fund advisor that Alicia just mentioned. So that you know, the URA is writing an RFP to find a fund advisory for the advisory board. Once the RFP is drafted, it will be shared with the advisory board for your approval before it is released. So that is being worked on. Is there any questions relative to that?
Is this person going to be separate from where the money is going to be held? Because my understanding that is that if you say you put the money in a particular entity that is an investment banker, so to speak, that they have the ability to do what you're asking, and it would be part of the fee that they charge for investing the money. So I'm trying to understand, is this going to be separate, or is it going to be two entities, or one?
So specifically as to where the money is held, and I apologize because I don't recall the name of the financial institution at this moment, but per the cooperation agreement between the three branches of government, the county, the city, and the school district, that cooperation agreement names the financial institute where the dollars have to be held.
Hello?
Yes,
Okay, so I think it was
it's
Zion.
yes, it's Zion National Bank. You're correct.
Right. So perhaps we should start with them since they hold the money. Maybe they have an investment banking function since they already hold the money.
We can certainly reach out to them to see if that is the case. I don't know, but I can certainly inquire.
The reason why I don't want to pay for something that we could obtain for free. And my understanding of investment bankers is that it's part of how, what your goals are, and they take that into consideration. So ours may be a little more complex than, say, a personal approach. However, they do this, and part of their covers that effort. So I just wanted to say that I don't want to pay for something that we could obtain for free because of where the money would be invested.
At the last meeting, the URA was instructed to draft the RFP, I believe, for someone who would be willing to potentially do it for free, and or they could also respond with what it would cost for us to potentially bring somebody on for this purpose. So I believe once the URA provides us with the RFP, we'll be able to go through it in detail to determine if it is indeed what we want, and if not, make changes to it then.
Thank you. Understood.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll move us on to new business, which speaks to one of the issues that RB brought up, which is an audit. So at the direction of the co-chairs, the URA is currently working on an audit of services and programs offered to Hill District residents. The audit includes government and nonprofit services. The URA staff will share their initial research via a shared folder with everyone on this committee. If you have any suggestions or organizations, nonprofits, or churches that the URA should contact as part of this ongoing audit, please share that with them and the URA staff now, if you would like to do so now, or via email for us. And the only reason I mentioned, RB, that this also, the audit sort of ties into what you're speaking of. When you were describing the programs to restore the housing, there are a number of organizations that are sort of doing that work. And so assessing their capacity to potentially either utilize these funds and or for us to also play in that role will become important. But the URA will be going through the process of doing the audit, and we'll send all that information to you all for your review. And this was brought up because we've had a couple discussions of not wanting to duplicate what was already being done in our neighborhood, so that these dollars wouldn't be duplicating, but rather would sort of be last dollars, add-on dollars on top of what already exists.
I have a question.
Well, I have a question.
My question was just when we say a Hill District audit on what services, Like, are we, like, what's the comprehensive definition of services? Like, are we just like social services,
No.
housing? Like, what's the definition here?
So it's going to include government and nonprofit services, but we're looking at, if I hear you correctly, Lakeisha, so it's not just social services, but it is related to housing. It is related to economic development. We're looking to capture all those categories. Part of the discussion was how much, as an example, how much of this fund should we utilize to fix people's roofs when there are already other programs to help people do that? Now, if those dollars aren't going far enough, then maybe we need to utilize some of our dollars, but that shouldn't be our first goal if there are other organizations already doing that. Should we utilize these dollars for after school programming when you already have Shinley Heights Collaborative, Center That Cares doing that work, or do they just need additional capacity? So it's trying to establish what is already ongoing so that we have a better sense of how much money, how much of these dollars should be going to those sort of activities. That better answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Arby, if I'm correct, and I need your correction on this one, you were more geared towards an independent audit, independent of the URA conducting it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's where, Councilman, I wanted to make clear, instead of this being a URA initiative or driven audit, it would be one more so that falls directly under this advisory board, independent of any systems, existing systems or opinions or systems. Am I correct in that, Arby?
That's correct. And the reason why I
Okay.
requested that is that the list of the entities. However, there's nothing available that tells us the effectiveness of what is being provided, who was provided the service, who was turned away, what reason they were turned away. There's a lot of comment that I get is that it took so long, I wasn't accepted, things of that nature. So that's effectiveness. We have no metric, and everything we're getting is secondhand. So yes, we don't want to duplicate efforts, but if an effort is being put forth and it's not effective, then we have to take a look at what can be done to help improve the effectiveness. Because there's a lot of complaints and there's a lot of visible evidence that what has been provided to date has not been effective. And we need to correct that as best we can. And having discussions with people and being independent of some of the providers is essential to getting a clear understanding. Thank you.
So two things. One, in addition, other members had also asked for this to be done, which is slightly different than what I've heard Arby just articulate. So as an example, Dr. Ellis on previous calls had also called for this sort of an audit that I put forward now in terms of understanding what all the services that are being provided. If I'm understanding Arby correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're looking for an independent audit of the services already being provided by the URA?
I'm looking at all of the entities and trying to understand the effectiveness. Because, it's said time and time again that things are being done and it's a duplication of effort. But if the effort's not effective, is the effort really accountable? Is it something that you can really say that is being done? That's what my intention is. One of the other comments in a previous meeting was an actual audit of the fund, the monies in the fund that should be presented each time we meet, or some frequency, so we know what's being done, what's being charged, things of that nature. There's no accounting method at this point to do that. So that it's a two-prong approach, so to speak.
So the latter, I think, would be fairly easy to actually provide, meaning the financial report of the fund itself. I think with every board meeting, that would be rather simple and easy to provide. The independent audit, while useful, I'm not sure how we actually get that done.
Should we, just as we're asking the URA to put out for financial advisors, someone to conduct, or an organization to conduct a Hill District audit, simply getting back to the basis of this conversation, which was to figure out who does what and their capacity and what is needed. Just those three things, simple things, because otherwise we start getting into things that honestly the allocation subcommittee could be handling, or one of our other subcommittees. But just for the purpose of this audit, my understanding was we wanted someone to look at how many programs there were and what services collectively. For instance, do we only have 3 education groups in the Hill District? We may find out we have 5. 3 just may be more effective than the other 2. You see what I'm saying? And that's what I thought this audit was, and not necessarily something that was run by the URA, but something that this board could put forth as information as well to the residents. And really, I see that as helping us get really good applicants too, or as a
Agreed.
way to get applicants. So, I mean, before we start adding other things, I just want to look at the basis and stick to that for this Hill District audit. Not something that comes out of the URA, but maybe facilitated in terms of bringing people to us to do this type of audit, which is simply figuring out who's where, who does what, which is kind of what I think Dr. Ellis was talking about at one of our other meetings.
Figuring out who is where and who does what is what the URA staff was attempting to begin to do. If we're asking for someone out that's not within the URA to do that, I'm okay with that. I would just ask that this board go find whom has the actual capacity to do that, and then make a recommendation for us to engage them.
Mhm.
So
Also, I just want to note for the record, and Sala, please just announce yourself for the record, because I believe I saw you. I think I see you logged on. When you get a moment, Sala, please unmute yourself and just announce yourself so we have you on for the record.
so Daniel,
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We hear you.
Okay, I'm on for the record.
Thank you.
so
Yes,
so
sir. Pardon me.
Daniel, if the URA could look at everything that they're doing, and then maybe perhaps we get somebody to look at what the URA provides, so it would be independent, because the URA looking at the other entities would be an independent view, and someone else looking at the URA would be an independent view. We just want independence so that we can say, well, there was no favoritism or anything like that. How would that work for discussion?
So as a URA board member, I can tell you we have to provide extensive reports, and it's all public. So anyone who wants to examine the various programs that the URA has is certainly willing to do so.
So, all right, that's a good suggestion. So how are the reports able to be dissected in such a way that you could see what pertains to the Hill District?
We more than likely we have those statistics. I don't think we keep them in that manner. More than likely, I'm thinking of the Housing Opportunity Fund as an example. We would be able to say, here's how many loans have been given out to the Hill District. We would be able to dig into that data. I believe so, yes.
Okay, so then the intent is to make sure that whatever we put forth to the residents is trustworthy. That's the only thing.
I
And
understand.
you know, that's the whole intent, so that people can look at it and not take it with a grain of salt, to be able to say, okay, this is really what's going on, and have the information in front of them to review themselves. I just want it to be trustworthy, so that, you know, people can't question it in such a way that it introduces doubt. That's my intent.
I just want to say something, Arby, what I hear you saying, or is that it seems like in terms of the audit, it's really about the actual questions being asked, right? And so maybe perhaps regardless of who is doing the audit, or if it's two different entities doing the audit and bringing that data together, that is really about the nature and the nuance of the questions to get the kind of responses that we're looking for. Does that make sense? That maybe it's, yeah, that perhaps this advisory board or some subcommittee of this group can help with the development of the questions that are being asked to all of these different entities, right? So that, to your point around, like people can say, oh, we saw 100 people in the last month, but how many people actually had their needs met from this particular activity, right? That maybe it's really about the development of the details inside of those questions that we need to pay attention to. And so if folks are asking those questions, regardless of who's asking those questions, hopefully we can get to the actual data that reflects what's happening on the ground.
Correct. That's what I meant by effectiveness. You know, how effective you talk to 100 people or touched 100 people, how many people were actually helped, that their issue was resolved, and that they didn't have to go to another agency seeking help. Just things like that, which tend to be the general response from the people in the neighborhood, in the community. Just want to be able to say that, hey, we did our due diligence, and based upon that, this is what the results are, and this is how we see that we can help with the dollars that we have. Because the dollars that we spend need themselves to be effective, and we need to be able to demonstrate that effectiveness. I just want to make sure that we are not diving too much into the dingy weeds, but enough detail that there's no reasonable doubt that it was effective or not effective. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you. With that, I want to move us on to a presentation from James Reed of the URA. And I think this is probably going to be the most helpful part of our board meeting today. Just so you all know, James Reed is the Strategic Initiatives and Business Growth Strategies Manager of the URA. And he has put together a fund analysis tool that I've asked him to walk this board through. So I'll turn it over to you, James.
Yes, thank you for that, Councilman, and good afternoon, advisory board members. What I'm going to do right now is just walk you through a couple of slides. I do have a spreadsheet tool that if we want to get a little more into the weeds, we can certainly do that. But to start, I was given, just some initial parameters on which to put minimums and maximums for how the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund or Reinvestment Fund could be allocated. So what you're seeing on this slide here are the eligible uses, the minimum percentage and the maximum percentage. And this slide is just a reproduction of the document that I received, and is just a potential of what could happen. One thing to note, when going through and allocating, we would want to see some adjustments to the grand total columns, because as you'll note on the minimum, we're actually only allocating 80% of the 7.3 million at this point in time. That's what those percentages all equal up to 80%. And as you see on the maximum, that column is actually overextended. So we would want to get some more guidance from the advisory board on how to balance that out so that, you know, it's 100% accounted for in each column. And if Gordon, if you could go to the next slide. And this is just looking at the the allocation by amounts. So, you know, some things to call out for, you know, development initiatives. There's potentially 2.9 to 3.6 million available. And Gordon, if you could go to the next slide. This is just a little bit of a roll up of categories to put it in a little bit more of a easier way to digest. So, you know, commercial development initiatives, you could have somewhere between 3 and almost 4 million to allocate. For MWBE initiatives, for example, you could have between somewhere around 900,000 to 1.6 million, and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to pause for a little bit if folks want to look at the screen a little more, or if there are any particular comments or questions at this juncture.
Okay, can you email this to us?
I would defer to how, you know, information is typically shared. If it's typically, you know, through revisiting these slides on the video when they're posted, that's fine. If they're shared as supplemental information, that's totally fine as well.
All right, so here's the reason why I asked that. We're seeing it for the first time, and it takes time for an individual to digest it and think about it. So at this point, it would be, you know, like first impression. So having something in advance to look at and review and think about it would be very helpful, and therefore you could get a more thorough response. So
Yes.
that's why I'm asking that.
Yep.
And that's something that
I just received the
something that we-
communication that we can share this, so we will definitely do that.
Okay, so the other thing is, and this is where I have difficulty. If the Hill District was a mature community, meaning that we had more rooftops than treetops, and we weren't losing several thousand residents per decade, so then this would probably work, because there wouldn't be so much work to be done in regards to restoring the community. So I don't disagree with the category. However, there's no prioritization, there's no priority. So you got $3.3 million minimum for commercial development initiatives. Okay. So there's a lot of commercial development being discussed. Everybody wants that. Okay, that's fine. But we don't have, when you look at the demographics, we don't have the residents to support it. So in my opinion, commercial development initiatives that are done very soon would be challenged to be sustainable, because we don't have the residents. And the demographics of the residents show that 50% of them don't have a car. Okay, and the majority of them make less than $15 an hour, which is $31,200 a year. So when I think of those things, I'm having difficulty with commercial development initiative. Not saying that it's not necessary, but I'm saying that the priority of it, you're lumping all this in such a way that each one has an equal priority, and that's ignoring census tract data. And
Can I jump in real quick, Arby?
Yes.
This is just purely an example. This is not to insinuate that you would use $3 million for commercial development initiatives. The tool he created was simply a tool for us to be able to say, if we wanted to spend 20% on workforce, if we wanted to spend 20% on youth, or if, as you may or may not be suggesting, if we wanted to instead spend 3 million on housing initiatives, whether that's development, whether that's assistance, here's how much money you could dedicate to each category. And here's, depending on how much you wanted to spend, here's how long that money would actually last you. So we'd able to be able to
Right.
sort of predict year by year. I just don't want you to get stuck on these particular
But
numbers.
it's how it's
Rather, it's a
presented.
tool to help us analyze how we want to spend the money and how long the money would actually last for each category.
But see, and I agree with what you're saying, Daniel, but what I'm saying is how it's being presented is those caveats, like let's say we replace commercial development initiatives with housing. Well, 3 million may be too much because we haven't looked at what is necessary to achieve a goal. We haven't done any goal setting. We don't have any metrics. This is what I was trained to do, that how you do these things. You just don't come up with a minimum maximum and things of that nature. There's no dive into, well, how do you say that, all right, commercial development initiatives, 3,056,000. Okay, to me, that's a swag. I don't have anything that supports. And if I substitute the commercial development initiatives with housing, at this point, I don't have anything to support that either. We don't have enough information to make one choice or another, but yet we still want to do this framework. And to me, that's putting the cart before the horse. And also, what I was talking about earlier, this is not sustainable. There's no replenishment of the fund. This 7.5 million that was deposited may be the only 7.5 million the fund ever receives. We may not receive another dollar. So that's not taken into consideration. And how do you make the fund sustainable? Because I want 5 years from now, there's going to be more people that need to be helped. 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out. Because our neighborhood, our community is very immature. We have more green space, more tree tops than we have rooftops. And I want small business. I want my father, your grandfather, small business owner. So I support that. But in order for those businesses to be types of businesses to be sustainable, you got to have people. And you got to have the ability.
If I may just interject,
ahead,
because I really do believe all of the questions and commentary that you're bringing forth are absolutely critical into, determining what the ultimate allocation is going to be. I agree with you that, having more information and more context to inform ultimately what happens is the way to go. I just want to stress that what I am doing right now is just walking through an example of how the fund might be allocated, knowing that there's a lot of additional work that needs to be done to determine what that allocation is going to be. And I see there's a hand raised from Alicia George.
Yes, thank you, James. In keeping with this is simply a model, because a lot of the details I would hope would be discussed within our subcommittees to refine this a little more. I just simply want to see more of your model here. Can you go back to the previous slide? Because I want to see how it relates to this slide by model only, because these amounts obviously will be discussed and looked at closer.
Yes, could we go back?
Is that possible?
Gordon, could we go to the previous slide?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, because it does show, a difference, and that's what I just want to see what the difference was. Thank you so much for presenting this model to us. Obviously, there is work to do on the part of this board, and moving forward, focusing on not necessarily what we don't have or an existing, maybe it's where we envision it being. Thank you very much, James.
Yes, and we do have a couple of other slides that we wanted to show just for sort of illustrative purposes in terms of what, it might take to, if you wanted to prioritize certain types of spending, what the costs generally are and what you may be able to get in terms of, if we crudely call it bang for your buck. And again, I recognize that in this model, the assumption is that all of the money gets expended. The actual model that I have can be configured in ways that are more sophisticated. That requires more detail and communication and direction from the advisory board. So, as you all are working to, really figure out what is the path forward, I'm certainly available to provide updated modeling or be available to, go through and bring the actual model out during one of these sessions. But for now, I'm gonna pause and see. Gordon, did you want to take these slides? I'm happy to take them if you would prefer that I do it.
James, I'm happy to run through them, but
Okay.
if you want to jump in at any moment, feel free.
Okay, I'll turn it over to you for just these couple of slides, and then on the last slide, I'll be back.
Thank you, James. Hello, board. My name is Gordon Hall, and I am a project manager with the Urban Redevelopment Authority. So breaking down James' model a bit, as the Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh, I thought for illustrative purposes, it could be useful to look into some budgets that we see in redevelopment projects at the Redevelopment Authority. And this first slide is just here to break down kind of what you're looking at in a regular budget. This is not a real budget. This is just a typical breakdown and the sources of uses that we generally see. You see the purchase price and the acquisition. That's of course the money it takes to buy a building. The soft costs, you'll hear that, I might use soft costs and pre-development funds interchangeably. That includes architecture, engineering, legal fees, permitting, inspections, insurance and taxes. Hard costs, that's a synonym for construction. That's basically materials and labor, and it's generally the largest percentage of the total development costs. In this bottom, just above total development costs, we have this contingency source, and that basically is the budget's reserve for cost overruns, and it's usually about 5 to 10% of the total development costs based on the project's complexity. For sources and uses, and I think this is an important slide to focus on, particularly the sources. We often hear developers talk about their gap in funding, and what that gap focuses on is usually the equity. As a general rule of thumb, banks and lending entities usually look for about 20% in equity. And often we think of equity as cash in hand, but that can also be, made up, a developer can go out and get money, like grants, for instance, an RCAP grant or a Keystone Communities grant. So when we think about the sources, oftentimes the project is primarily funded by the bank, but that 20%, the bank needs to see that the developer has some skin in the game. And here are some uses. This is similar to the budget that we saw on the last slide. So what I'm going to do in the next couple slides is I'm going to go through some real budgets that we have at the URA currently. The numbers have been tweaked a little bit because these are real budgets. So, I didn't want to give anything away because these are active budgets that have come across at the URA. They comprise of 3 different types of development projects, one of which is a dilapidated building that needs a full rehab. Another is a really nice building in good condition that just needs a change in use. And the final is a vacant lot turned into a mixed use commercial development. So let's take a look. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here, but this first project, this is a city-owned building that has been vacant for over 10 years. So as you all know, the building is in, it needs a full rehab, it needs a full gut. There's water damage, there's structural damage. A full renovation is necessary to get this building in working orders, including mechanical, plumbing, electric, and a new certificate of occupancy. As you can see, the purchase price, this property is only $50,000. That's mostly due to the state of the condition of the building. The total construction and hard costs comprise of over 75% of this budget, which makes sense since the building is in disrepair. And as you can see, the developer is bringing $100,000 to a $400,000 project. That's 25% equity. And that's well in line with what a developer should be working with. Our second example project is, this is a privately owned historic building. The building is in good condition, but it's going through a change of use from light industrial, mixed use, commercial, and residential. So this is an existing building that is currently used, oddly enough, is actually a mechanic shop, but it is historic, and the developer wants to change it into a mixed use retail commercial on the first floor and residential upstairs. I'll take a moment to just look through these numbers. As you can see, the purchase price is 50% of the total development budget. That has to do with the excellent condition and historic nature of this building. And due to that, the interior renovations are still a high percentage, but a little bit lower than a full gut rehab like we saw in example project number 1. And I will go to the final project, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. This project, I think, is interesting. This is a city-owned vacant property, vacant land. The intended development project is a new construction mixed-use commercial development. As you can see, this total development cost is higher, $10 million. This is higher than anything we've seen in the other 2 slides, but it gives you guys a good idea of the price in which materials and labor are these days. New construction tends to be the most expensive. As you can see, the purchase price is very low percentage-wise because it is a vacant lot, but the hard costs are high and the soft costs are extremely high as well because there is a lot of architecture, engineering, and zoning and permitting that is going into this project. So that's just for illustrative purposes, is to give you guys an idea of some development projects that are in our portfolio here at the URA, and just to maybe get some ideas flowing about, for the allocation, if money were to go towards development projects, to give you an idea of what the pricing is looking like these days. So I'm happy to answer any questions on any of these example projects. After that, I think James has one more slide, which I'm happy to go to.
Any questions?
Yeah, I was waiting for others, give them a chance. So I'll wait.
Gordon, do you want to go back to your last slide?
Sure.
Go ahead and ask your question, Aubrey. Doesn't appear
Okay,
anyone else.
so in the outline of the proposal that I put forth earlier in the meeting, that would be example number 4, a building that's condemned, owned by the city or the URA. So that's where I'm trying to focus us so that we would be able to earn money on the money that we have to do projects like this in the 3 examples put forth. Because what we have now in regards to, we can't do that at this time. I want us to acquire money to do these things. So what would it cost for a building that's condemned, that's owned by the city, owned by the URA? It's got a blue label on it right now. How much does that cost to be purchased? Your examples or in terms of being illustrative or spot on, but you know, with $7 million thereabouts, we could do maybe one or two, and then that be kaput. So I'm just trying to understand how to take a building that's scheduled for demolition, perhaps because it's been condemned and vacant. I know we're 10 buildings right now on the hill, all have blue labels on them. So what would it cost to purchase that and do a rehab to where it has the basic necessities, water, sewage, gas, electric, you know, where it was completed as a shell in the interior? What would that cost?
Yeah, Arby, it's a really good question. And of course, there's not, you know, every project is unique and every building has its own needs, and a lot of it has to depend on the, you know, depends on the final uses. Example project 1 is pretty close. I'm not sure, you know, if it has the blue marker on the front door, but you know, it is city owned and it has been vacant for 10 years. So this is a pretty bare bones budget, but I mean, I think, you know, out of my 3 examples, this is probably the closest one. Since example 3 is not an existing building, you know, that's a vacant lot, and that's a larger mixed use development. Example 2 is the building is in really good condition, so the purchase price is high. I think example project 1, it doesn't answer your question perfectly, but I think this gives you maybe an idea of what it costs to get a building up and back from working order that needs everything in terms of you know, mechanical, plumbing, and electric. This is probably the closest I have, but it's not, of course, it's not exactly what you're asking, and I understand that.
Yes, so we can work with this. So in my discussions with various people, the consensus is $100 per square foot, $75 to $100 per square foot to renovate a building that's condemned, and $300 plus per square foot to build a new building on a vacant lot. So what I'm interested for our fund to be able to renovate, sell, and take that money and turn it over so we can help people do the type of projects that you described. So is $100 per square foot and $300 plus per square foot, is that in line with what you're showing in these 3 examples?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you know, this is something that I should have provided. I should have provided square footages of each of these buildings, but basically the footprint of this building is about 900 square feet. So it's, you know, it's a small, you know, row home type development, but it's 4 stories. So that's about 3,600 square feet in total. And yeah, this is coming up to 400,000, you know, when you're adding in soft costs. So yeah, that your rule of thumb actually works out pretty well for this. If you say it's $100 per square foot for a rehab, this is 3,600 square feet of floor space. That's pretty good.
So yeah, that's some of my close friends are been trying to get me into this development space, but anyway, I digress. So this is helpful. What I would like for this board to be able to do is something like this and be able to contract with somebody to do all these things. The only thing we do is pay the contract. And then, you know, it goes up to sale and the money comes back. It's minimal work on us. We don't have any hands-on. And let's see, project 3, City-owned vacant lot.
Project 3 was out of the ground, brand new construction.
Correct.
I saw Marimba's hand up.
You can go first, Councilman.
No, Ari was asked about number 3. I was just clarifying that that was an example of new construction on a
Oh.
vacant lot.
I just wanted to, sure, thank you. I wanted to thank the URA for the case studies that have been provided here. I think it really anchors our thinking in the realities of what development costs are. And what stands out to me more than ever is that the role of the fund, which is to fund projects to come to fruition, can be very effective in providing hard to find funding to initialize and or complete projects of impact for the neighborhood. I think those opportunities are most obvious in the pre-development space and the kind of gap closing space, maybe towards the end of a development. I don't think that we should be last in money, as a lot of people, you know what I mean, want to be last in. But the reality is we are at a stage right now where if we want to fulfill the community's master plan, if we want to ensure minority participation and ownership, resident participation and ownership, when you're dealing with low wealth communities, those early dollars are very, very difficult to come by because you don't have maybe, you know, as many assets to leverage. You may be saddled with student loan debt. You may, you know, have a broad range of expenses that prevent you from just going to a bank and getting a loan against your existing portfolio of assets as an individual and or business. So I wanted to lift that up. And then I also wanted to say these numbers are modest. You know, development is very expensive and it takes a long time. And, you know, I do want to recognize the organizations in the neighborhood who are doing community development because a lot of them have been, you know, really at it for quite some time. Amani Christian Community Development Corporation, the Shinley Heights Collaborative, the Hill CDC, Macedonia was doing some development for quite some time. And then of course, that doesn't even really include the MBE developers. And I think that when we think about how the fund can get a return on its investment, we can condition our funding to be repaid in a certain amount of time, right? So that when and if the project is refinanced, the fund can be reimbursed plus interest, but had a catalytic role in bringing a project to fruition. So I'll leave it at that for now. But you know, I think that the examples really show that it would be a really expensive endeavor for us to do direct development, and that the money would just simply would be gone very quickly. And not to mention that we'd be saddled with administrative costs of staffing, insurance, holding costs. Also, I meant to mention PHDC, which is the URA's housing development arm. They also do a lot of the housing rehab work. So at any rate, not to mention the technical expertise that it would take to bring on to deliver on this kind of development work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marimba. Yep, well said. Yeah, some of the James and I were talking when we were putting these slides together, and we did note that some of these budgets, although they're real budgets, they are a little bit low. So I appreciate your comments. James, I'm going to give this last slide to you.
Great, thank you, Gordon. And this last slide is really just to try to put a tangible example in front of folks to potentially have something to consider as you go on to really talk about the best way to allocate the funds. And so what I've done here is just given some examples in which the fund could be used and what you might be able to do there. So starting with microloans, this number really comes out of a part that would be dedicated towards assisting MWBEs. And so if you were to have some sort of microloan program, saying each loan around $15,000, just to kind of start, you could at a minimum have about 48 and go up to perhaps 97. And that's, again, all of this is just based on, this current allocation that we went through at the beginning, which again is just for illustrative purposes. And then again, rent assistance at $1,000 per occasion. You could have a little more bang for your buck there potentially. Mortgage assistance at $5,000 per occasion. You can see that, the expenses add up quite quickly. And so, really trying to determine what is the best measures of impact really will come down in part to some of the values and articulation of needs and how they may be met most impactfully, and that's something that this advisory board will really have to kind of determine. And then just for a couple more examples, new housing construction, through 2021, some data for Allegheny County wide suggests that new home construction is about 460,000, and that's just an average. So there would be some potential wiggle room depending on the layout and things of that nature, but it's a good starting point. And you can see it would be potentially 6 to 7 homes based on this hypothetical allocation. And purchasing an existing home, for example, this is just for purchase, not any rehab or renovation work or anything like that, at 150,000 per occasion, and you get yourself between 19 and 24. And then using Gordon's $700,000 example on a commercial rehab project earlier, with the around 3 million that was that could be potentially allocated, towards commercial developments, that would get you somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5. And so, again, this is just for illustrative purposes. And as the advisory board advances its thinkings and allocation plan, and if there's a need to see different numbers, we can certainly accommodate that and produce information that would help in your decision making.
One more thing I'd like to add. Thank you for that, James. One more thing I'd like to add is, there are some creative opportunities, I think, for the fund to have impact, particularly in commercial redevelopment, such as supporting master leasing, needs for projects to get financed. I think that that's a huge opportunity because, to just explain that, if you do a commercial development and you have, let's just say, 2,000 square feet of space available, which is a relatively, kind of modest amount of space, 2,000 square feet that needs to be leased, is very difficult to, if not impossible, to go to a bank and get your project financed if you have, let's just say, 4 units up top or 12 units up top, and that 2,000 square feet of commercial space on the first floor. When you go to the bank, you 9 times out of 10 are going to need that 2,000 square feet of space to be leased already, right? And so herein lies a challenge for neighborhoods that are in the early stages of development, because it's, people are expecting a very deep discount to come to the neighborhood, or they're saying, I'm going to just wait and see what will happen in this neighborhood before I'm willing to pay market rate. And so a lot of the commercial space in our communities will need to be subsidized in order to ensure that the project can happen at all. So there may be some opportunities for the fund to support those kinds of creative strategies that have major impact, but don't necessarily spin down the entire fund quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for James or Gordon? If not, thank you both for providing this information to us. I think it's very helpful and provides a lot of great context for us to continue thinking. That will move us on to other business. Is there any other business anyone would like to bring to the table?
Yeah, I have a few items, but I can wait for others to go first.
Go ahead, Aubrey.
Okay, so one item, communication. So we're getting our meeting notice, we're getting our agenda the day before, we're getting the presentation from someone the day of. Is it possible that we can get these things 3 business days ahead of time so that we would have time to look at what's being presented or thought? And there's no ask about anyone on the board and what they may want to see on the agenda. This is our 5th meeting. So I would hope that we can do that so that we can work more effectively as a team. Can I put forth a motion that we get our materials or meeting notice, things of that nature, at least 3 days in advance before the meeting?
Yes, Aubrey, we will work to do that. You received it late this time because I hadn't actually signed the document that needed to be signed on the URAs and for everything to be sent out. But moving forward, I will make sure on my end that I'm acting more timely and and thus the information gets out to you in a more timely fashion.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I'm being asked is about is community participation. People want to, it's fine that they see the recording, but there are people that want to ask questions themselves. So we should take time to consider how we want to do that. I think this has not been resolved. The PA Sunshine Act, I'm pretty certain applies to us. And from what I've seen and what we have done, I don't think we've been really in compliance. So we need to get some written understanding so that we're in compliance with the PA Sunshine Law, and also people want to participate or something in that manner. We had some people that apparently couldn't attend, and it wasn't very nice. So can we have some consideration for that and some discussion around that? Thank you.
So just provide clarity on one item regarding the Sunshine Act. It is the URA's opinion that this board is not subject to the requirements of open meetings.
Okay, so can they provide?
I'll ask them to please provide a memo as to why, and we'll have that provided to this board.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we should also remind folks with questions or comments that we do have a system set up whereby they can communicate, which is simply to communicate what they want to do through the URA email, and then that will be forwarded to us. And then the co-chairs, excuse me, can decide how to put that on the agenda or bring it to the table. What we don't want to do is get into a logjam We're here again, we're sitting on funds and they're not moving. We're sitting on a process and we're not moving. A lot of people have had desires for the last few years, myself included, about being on certain committees and things like that. But as you see, there is plenty of times and opportunities for your voice to still be heard. And I think that this board should be no different. We should be acknowledging that. We should be hearing that, but we need the process by which that is done. And on that same day that we agreed on that process, Daniel just explained why this week was late, but we did make the motion that we receive these at least 3 days ahead of time. So, the communications and information. And if anything needs to get on the agenda, well, we have between now and the next scheduled meeting date to get that to Julia. And I just want to make sure that we uphold that for the sake of order and moving forward, because I really would like to see these applications getting out to folks who need it now, as soon as possible, even if we have to do this in 2 rounds. I believe that we are here to work on behalf of the people and make good decisions on behalf of the greater community, and any log jams and stuck on technicalities will not move us forward. Particularly since we do have these systems in place 3 days ahead of time for communications, as well as from the community to allow that input and commentary, which was why too I was very positive about the recordings of these meetings so they could comment.
Thank you, Alicia. Is there any other comments or anything else that
Yes.
needs brought to the table from members?
Yes. I received a comment about the website, and the comment was, well, you see URA, you see Hill CDC emblem, you see the councilman's emblem. Where are the others? Doesn't the Hill District Consensus Group have one? Does Historic Hill have something? Their logo is on the page. It's just not the URA, the Hill CDC, and the councilman. And I was asked that, and I said, well, I'll bring it up. So can we get everyone else's logo on that page? Is that a possibility?
Sure. I'm
Yeah.
perfectly okay with that. I would ask
Julia.
everyone. Sorry.
Go ahead, Councilman.
No, I was going to say that's fine by me. I would simply ask everyone to please send over their logos.
Yes, if you could send me your logos, we'll get those added to the site as soon as they're received.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anything else? It's now 4:35, so we spent about an hour and a half.
We need to, I would like for us to visit these policy and procedures. A lot of questions and comments. At some point, if we need to establish a committee, that's fine, but they need to be visited. There's been a couple comments in previous meetings, and so far they've been ignored.
Okay. If the board wishes to establish a subcommittee, they certainly have that ability. Is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, I need a motion to adjourn.
I
Motion to
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn this meeting at this time.
At 4:36. Motioned by Ms. George. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Arby. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are in adjournment. Thank
Aye.
you all for your time and your work and your energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.